preach about. It's the resurrection. I could get up and do this, you know? So we leave, and I'm carrying my daughter in her car seat to the car, and she sees this just look on my face. And she says, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "Nothing, just let it go. Just let it go." She's like, "Are you mad at me? You're mad at me. Did I do something wrong?" And I was like, "You didn't do anything wrong. Just let it go. I don't want to hurt her feelings and say anything bad about her church." Finally, we're in the car. We're pulling out of the parking lot. And she's crying. She says, "What did I do to make you so mad? Please tell me." I said, "Okay, fine. I'm not mad at you. But there's one thing to preach about on Easter. There's only one thing to preach about. And I don't know how he messed it up so bad. Every time we come to your church, it's like God's wife has burnt the beans and we have to eat them. And we have to smile and act like they taste good." Oh, good job on the beans. And I'm done. So if you want to come back to this church, that is fine. But I am done. And without skipping a beat, my wife looks at me and she says, "Well, fine then. Why don't you be a man and find us a church?" And all of a sudden, it was in my court.
That was a good one.
Yeah, and I was like, well, crap. I have to do better than she did, or else I failed, you know? So I did what any American guy would do. I got on the internet, and I start looking up churches in the area, and I'm very audibly and visually connected. It has to be something that's going to get my attention, because I'm in a band and we're on stages with rock and roll and lights, and it has to be a church that's rock and roll. So I watched probably 5 different churches, just a few minutes of each one. Nope, not for me. Next one, not for me. And I ran across George's church, Pathways. Pastor Brent was up there in a t-shirt and blue jeans, and he was preaching, and I was like, wait a second, this might be the one. And it's a very seeker-friendly church for people just like how I was. So we show up the first Sunday, and we take Lily to the children's department, and she just disappears. She's like, "Oh, this is fun," and she's gone. No crying, no fussing. I was like, well, that's a good sign, right? We go in and sit down, and the worship team, electric guitars, drums, bass, multiple people singing, and they cover a rock and roll song by Journey, "Don't Stop Believing," as a worship song. And I'm sitting there going, this is it. I think I found where I belong. And my wife's looking at me, and she's watching me and seeing my reaction, and I'm smiling and I'm singing, and she's never seen me like this in church. So we were at Pathways for about 7 or 8 years. But in the beginning of my Pathways experience, I would still be out on the road with my band. But when we would come in and I would be in town, we would go to church, and Pastor Brent preached a message, because I knew I was saved, because I got saved at a young age, and I remember the feeling, and I remember it was very real. But he said, you should pray this prayer for God's will in your life, and amazing things will happen. Amazing things will happen. So I was like, I like amazing things. So I prayed this prayer, because what could go wrong? I'm in this great band. I've got a smoking hot wife. I've got this beautiful little girl. I've got this glorious beard. What could go wrong? And he made me fall out of love with my band. He put a thought in my mind that I would rather hear my daughter laugh than smell these stinky musicians every weekend. So every time I would go out with the band, all I could think about was my little girl. Until I finally resigned from the band, completely left them, and I sent an email to the church and said, hey, I play guitar and I can sing a little bit. If you want to use me, use me. And they threw me to the youth group, and I became a youth worship leader. So that's where my ministry really started, was with the youth. I led worship. I didn't know how to lead worship. I'd only been singing drinking songs. I didn't know anything about singing Jesus songs. But I learned, and I learned how to worship by teaching them how to worship. And over time, they started asking me to speak. So I started doing small lessons for the youth. And then over time, they opened up a campus in Knoxville, and it needed a youth pastor. So they're like, hey, Ben, do you want to do this youth pastor thing? So I started doing the youth pastor thing. And in the middle of that, Sunshine's daughter, Mackenzie, was talking about Uganda and talking about these children that were demon possessed and how the parents of these children were just tying them up and putting them in the corner so they wouldn't hurt themselves or hurt other people. And God spoke to me and he said, you know how to do that. They don't know how to do that, but you know how to do that. And I'd never done it before, but God shook me and said, you can cast out demons. And I'm just a punk rock guy from Tennessee with tattoos. I don't know mission work. I don't know anything about it. So I go to Sunshine after God confirmed this is what he wanted me to do. And I said, we don't call her Sunshine in the States, we call her Melanie. And I said, Melanie, I believe God's called me to Africa. But at the time, my beard was down to here. I had a very long beard. And she said, that's fine. If you want to go to Africa, that's fine, but you'll have to cut your beard off. And I said, okay, I'll cut my beard off then. And she's like, just like that? And I said, well, we know what happened to Jonah. I'm not going to say no to God. So after I had already agreed to cut my beard off, I said, well, I already agreed, but why do I need to cut my beard off? And she said, they will think you are Muslim because only Muslim men have beards down there. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. So I don't want them thinking I'm Muslim. So how short are we talking to cut my beard off? So I cut my beard to this short. And we show up in Africa. My first trip down here was in 2017. And Pastor Sampson looks at me and he says, Pastor Benjamin, we are so glad to have you, but I must ask you, where is your beard? And I said, well, Sister Sunshine told me that I had to cut my beard off so that you guys would believe the teachings, or else you might think I was Muslim. And there was a long pause. And he says, but we have Facebook. We knew you had a beard. So this is my 5th trip. Yeah.
Wow.